Welcome back, everybody, to our spreadsheet series, week 2. All right. So last week 1, we were talking about just a basic structure, basic anatomy of Excel, and and it's a very critical and important to know the sort of like a basic structure, the anatomy of Excel, and all the basics, sort of like Excel terminology. For future reference, let's say somebody explained to you how to do something and they using the terminology and they using the reference certain anatomy of Excel, you know exactly what they mean step by step when they give you the instruction. If you were to look it up, how to do it, okay? So I just want to recap what we did last week. It basically, we talked about formatting data, right? We work with, our goal is try to imitate and replicate this design, right? And we just talking about how to format. Formatting the data is kind of like how do you design your data? How do you decorate your data? It's kind of like how a person dress, right? So how do you choose your clothes and what's the color of your shirt, jacket, and which one go best with which, right? So that's formatting. That's all it is. And when we talk about spreadsheet, right? It's all about data. Spreadsheet is all about data. So when it comes to data, there are only two things: is how to format data, and the second thing is how do you process your data by using either a built-in functions, like whether it's a financial built-in function or mathematical built-in function. Think of all the fancy, useful calculators out there. Whether it's a financial calculator or MATLAB calculators. Think of it. Excel spreadsheet, Google spreadsheet is right there for you. You just have to sort of like tap into its feature, right? And then, but before, sort of, you have data to work with, how do you actually get in? So basically, spreadsheet is all about getting your data onto the spreadsheet, formatting your data. It's kind of like how do you dress, how do you decorate, your space. The same amount of space but different interior design. If you actually sit in the space and you feel it been designed really well, you feel like you feel a sense of empowerment. You feel like your creativity is increased. It boosts your personal productivities, right? Or creativities. Okay, so yeah, last week we were trying to see, this is probably our assignment from last week 1. You try to imitate and replicate this design. And by formatting, I'm talking about, you're adjusting the table, the style of the table, the font, the font size, the color for the font families, and just a layout, And that's, we just want to sort of like, and then you can choose a border, whether or not you want a border. If you want a border, what is the style, a border style, So all of this stuff, right? And we basically just formatted based on the static values. The values, we basically just manually put those data, those values onto the tables, onto the column, into the rows. And this is what we call it's a row and column, right? It's like this one. This is its row, and then this is a column. Column A, column B, column C, row 1, right? And that's how you reference a cell, by sort of like identifying the column, followed by row. The column is alphabetical, row is numerical, and you reference the address of a cell is combination of column followed by row. So this one right here is a D3, right? So that's how you reference a cell. This is a range of cell, okay? And then just sort of like overview, recap of what we did last week. And this area right here is a ribbon area, right? The ribbons basically provide you the toolbox. That's all it is. The ribbon is a toolbox, right? And then they have this menu right here. When you click on insert, the submenu is changed, depends on the category, because all of this submenu is belonging to that category. And if you pay a little bit more attention to it, you see that they are grouped together, separated by a vertical line. When you go to draw, this is probably they group it together. You go to data, this is all grouped. The thing that's related, closely related, they are grouped in one category, right? So it's kind of like that. Whatever you're looking for, chances are you'll be able to find it in the toolbox, in this section area up here. Or, a quick tip for working with Excel, whatever you need, just sort of like do a right click, that's gonna bring up your quick menus, right? And then you can, you can see whether or not you're looking for is there, either that or the menus over here. And then whatever you want to get out, just do escape, right? Control Z to undo stuff. Those are the tips when working with Excel. If you can work with Excel without mouse, that's more efficient. Just sort of like no keyboard shortcuts, right? In continuation with formatting, I want to sort of like get to, the next thing is conditional formatting, right? So today I want to accomplish two things. First of all, we want to talk about conditional formatting, which is the advanced part, right? Conditional formatting, and then the next thing we want to talk about data source, right? So now the part 2 of formatting is conditional formatting. What is conditional formatting? Conditional formatting is, you're gonna format this way if certain condition present. It's kind of like, it's kind of like color coded. If you have this condition, you format this way. If you have this condition, you decorate this way, you design this way, right? It's all it is, right? So let's talk about conditional formatting. Let's say I have this table right here, very short table, right? Very small table, right? Right? It's always a good practice when working with, sort of like when you try to work on a new feature, implementing a new feature in Excel or in general. It's always nice to sort of like to test it out to see whether or not it works with a very smaller data set. The most simpler form, like a table, a smaller table. If it works and you confirm that your logic works, then you can take it, to a bigger data set. And then if finally you can actually apply that into your big projects, right? But it's always nice to sort of like work with a smaller table. Let's say that if you want to highlight the sales, whenever the employee is actually work in the sales department, we actually have 4 different departments, finance, marketing, IT, sales, right? And HR. So you say that whenever a person works in sales department, you want to highlight that particular sales, right? So that is the column, right? Remember, in Excel, you can add as many columns as you want easily, just like you add as many rows. So that probably might not, it's sort of like doesn't give you a notion that, sometimes unlike database, when you create a table, you have to give the table definition. It's sort of like a schema for your table definition. You have to sort of like give, the number of columns. Those are fixed, right? And then you can actually add as many rows, as many data into it. The column signify like a properties, like an attributes, right? Like the property, the attributes, the characteristics. Let's say that the customer is actually of the same data type. They all actually have the same set of attributes, first name, last name, right? And this is right here, the column. Basically, it's just like the attributes, right? And the fact that in Excel, they make it so easy for us to sort of like add extra column, extra row, it doesn't help you to see that, column is different. So that's why it's more important for the column. That's why when you reference a cell in Excel, a single cell, you always identify, by the column followed by the row, okay? Because the column is the attributes. Okay, now let's say that you want to highlight a cells. Whatever you see the keyword cells, you want to highlight that. So let's say that this is the column, right? Okay, and then you go to conditional formatting. You go to conditional formatting. You say you can click on new rule or you can manage rule, and then you bring up new rule, right? Then just go over here. Just say that it's column B, and you want to have the column fixed, so you want to reference that by using absolute referencing, which is the $sign in front of the column. So there's a column B, and then 2 is actually the first row, right? And then you want to format it with red, right? Whenever you see cell, see that? So now whenever you see cell, this cell will be highlighted red, right? If you change this one to, instead of like HR cell, right, it's red. Well, in Excel, if you don't want it, you can easily just reverse your action by a keyboard shortcut Z. Okay. Now, if you want the entire column, the entire row, if you want the entire row highlighted, then you're gonna select, the data set. That's your scope, right? You want to highlight the entire row instead of like one cell, the entire row. Whenever you see the department is IT, right? You want to sort of like highlight the entire row. So your data set going to be the entire table, which is this one right here. And then just go to format, conditional formatting, and manage new rule. Okay. This is basically just like one case of conditional formatting. You can explore and go through all this one. If you have time, you explore this. You say that if this one is B2, we go to, let's say, IT, right? You want to format the entire row, right? You see that? So that's the entire row. So remember that a quick tip for highlighting, conditional formatting. If you want one cells, sort of like choose one column, and by reference, sort of like reference the column fixed by reference it using a $sign. And when you want to highlight the entire row, you want to select your data set. It's going to be the entire table. One cell, one column, the entire row, the entire range of cells, which is like your entire tables, right? If you change this one to HR, no, right? That's one I would just see that if you want to change the color to be a little better, maybe probably like, I don't know, right? Make it a little brighter, right? So that's what it is. That's what it comes to like highlighting, conditional formatting. At this point, formatting, basically, I'm just highlighting it, but whatever is true for formatting, like a layout, the font size, the different types of font family, it is also true of conditional formatting as well, okay? Okay, so that is going to be like, that's going to be conditional formatting. And then whenever you want to do conditional formatting, remember this is the area you want to go. It's actually under home menu. You go to this particular group right here, conditional formatting, and go to manage rule. You want to clear rule, you can always go here. If you want to clear rule that only applicable for like the entire worksheet, that's kind of like a bigger scope, then you want to go for your clear rule from the entire sheet. If you want for that particular worksheet, then your scope could be a lot smaller only on that particular worksheet. Okay? So that's conditional formatting. And then the next things I want to touch on is the data source, right? What is the data source, right? The data source is kind of like, let's say that you want to implement a drop-down box, which is these things right here. Right? Remember that? Remember we actually have this one right here, the status. This is what they call a drop-down box, or the drop-down list box, okay? So that's kind of like the drop-down box is kind of like where are you getting, and then of course there's a value go into the box, the drop-down box. And the data source is referring to where are you getting your values from, That's the source of your data. Where is your data is coming from? It's kind of like source of income. Your income is coming from your salary. Your income comes from your commission. Your salary comes from your sort of like stocks or pension, right? So data source is the same way. It's kind of like the source of your data. Where is your data is coming from? If you want to implement the drop-down box, and of course they have some values into it, right? So where are you getting your values from? Where are you getting your data from? I'm going to introduce you two ways for you to do it, okay? Let's say that you have, like this one right here, right? It's sort of like a bigger table. It's way too big, you don't want to overwhelm yourself, you just want to test it out, okay? Now you just want to test it out. So you want to sort of like test out new feature on the smaller data set. If it works, your code is fine, works fine, it doesn't break, then you can actually just put it onto the larger data set on the real projects, right? Because in case, it's a good practice for us to sort of like work with a smaller data set. Very simple table. In case if your code break, it doesn't work as the way you think, you claim it should be working. It's sort of like your brain claim that it should be working, but in reality, in fact, it doesn't work, right? So it's a lot easier for you to sort of like spot out where the issue is coming from, where the issues are. What I mean by easier, that means it's faster. Why? Because you have less thing to inspect. You have way less thing to look at it. You have only about few columns, and then you only have like a few rows, right? A lot less data to inspect and examine. So you'll be able to pinpoint and narrow down where the issues are. You isolate the issues, right? Let's say that you have a column, right? Just like this table here is a status, right? You have status, right? Right, just say that. And let's say that you have a status. Let's say that we're going to have, I don't know, possible values like active, inactive, on leave, etc. Right? Like those are the three different values. Okay, we can actually, the first method that you provide this set of values, you can actually provide them inline, right? So provide them inline. You go to data validation. I believe it's actually over here. data, go to data. First of all, go to data, okay? And then you go to this thing right here, it's called data validation, right? First of all, make sure that you click on the cell you want. Click on this cell right here, F2. Remember, column followed by row, F2, okay? And then click on data, then go to here, data validation. Okay, and then you go to this drop down list, go to list, right? And you can actually just sort of like provide those values right here, you know, inline. They say active, separated by a comma. Inactive on live, right? Right? So there you are, you actually have all that, right? And then you can easily sort of like copy that formulas, you know, by sort of like point your mouse cursor to the bottom right corner until it becomes a cross side like that, and then you just drag it down, okay? And there you are, you actually have all this stuff, right? And now you want to conditional format, and you apply conditional format, and if it is inactive, you highlight this way. If it is, you know, like on live, you highlight the other way, right? Just like this one. If it is active, you highlight this way. If it is this, you highlight that way, right? Okay, like you can actually do that. Let's say conditional formatting, right? Go here, go to manage rule, new rule, right? Send that dollar sign, remember it's a fixed column, F2 equal to inactive, right? And then you want to sort of like format it, maybe sort of like a light yellow, right? Right? See now you actually have that, right? Right? And now when you want inactive, let's say you want a different color, or you know when the value is in that drop down list box selected, if the value is inactive, you want to change it to green. Let's say that. So you want to say that manage, and you want basically just duplicate, right? This one is right, and then when you change it to maybe green, something like that. And then you want sort of like on live, right? Because that's probably one of our possible values in that drop down list, right? Right? Apply, okay. Now when it's active, it's color. When it's on live, see that? That's how you do it, okay? This is how you accomplish, you know. And then when it works, when you confirm that your code works, it doesn't break, you can actually just take it, you know, to the larger data set. Okay? That's the data source, and I want to introduce you the second method, right? Kind of like status method 2, right? Remember that if you want to auto adjust for the width, you just sort of like place your mouse cursor here and then double click on it. This will automatically adjust to make sure that the text fit within the width of the column. Okay, let's say that you want the first method that you provide the values, the set of value for the drop-down list box, in line. But what if you want to, you probably already have that list somewhere already. Remember that Excel can provide you a way for you to sort of like get the data from external data source, meaning that you probably have the data sitting somewhere from, like a separate external database. You can connect to that database and withdraw the values. Okay, the status for the method 2, I want to introduce you the second one, but for our sake, make it, to simplify, for this data source things, just simplify for, for our sake. Let's say that we actually just get it from the assistant list. We get it from the assistant list. We get it from the existing list. Let's say that list is actually existed somewhere in our sheet already. Let's say that you have a one worksheet is all the data, right? This is your set of all the possible value that goes into that drop-down list box. Okay, so now go back to this one right here, and then you go to data, right? You go to data validation, right? And then of course, when you go to this drop-down list, go to this here, and then remember right here in data source, you can actually just sort of like go to this worksheet, a separate worksheet, and then just highlight, just go ahead and select this range, right? I want to sort of like select the range that actually have empty, so in case you need to sort of like add more value later, like that. Now you have this, right? And then you just copy that all the way down, right? Sometimes just go ahead and then choose this one right here. Right. Let's say that later on you want to have another status. You can easily sort of like edit, another status. Let's say, just edit another one. Another one. Right? And then this list right here will get updated. Another one. See that? You can easily just add another name for this, another value for the status. Okay, so that's the second method, how you sort of provide the list of value for that drop-down list box. Okay, and then of course if you want it, you can actually just conditional formatting. Okay, if it is on left, you actually highlight this color. If it is active, you highlight on this color. Right, that's it. That's how you combine conditional formatting with the drop-down list box. And now you know how to sort of like get into this one right here. When this logic works, right? you basically can actually take it to this things right here. Otherwise, if you actually started out with this one right here, when your code breaks, then you get overwhelmed. You don't know exactly, where the issues are. That's why working with a smaller data set is kind of like advantage for you. So you can isolate the issues and all this stuff. When it's worked, for sure it works all the time in all cases. Then you basically just sort of like apply into the bigger data set to a real tables, okay? That's it for this week, and I hope that you probably, by now you'll be able to sort of, learn your way around, maneuver, and navigate through, all the tools related to formatting. And you can actually just combine. And how do you apply the drop-down list? How do you apply the conditional formatting to the drop-down list box? Because those values are generated dynamically. Let's say that if you visited a website and where you have to choose the state of United States, right? We actually have 52 states, and to see whether or not this techniques work, you can actually just try to apply. Let's say that you have state, right, and you want to implement that in sort of like a drop-down list box, so people can choose when you fill out your address. You can choose the state of the state in which you reside, right? So I have a website here, and this website right here, right, provide you sort of like the list of all 50 states. Just copy this list right here, the list of all 50 states. That's going to be your data set, right? You have 52 possible values for your drop-down list. Let's say that you want to sort of like put it here, say state in the United States, right? So this is going to be your value. You know what? I'm always want to sort of like, no. Let's copy one more time. Right? It's a good practice for me to sort of like leave a little space right here, sort of like empty value, nothing. So when the drop down box sort of like pops out, you'll be able to, sort of like select nothing or select the state in which you reside. So go ahead and copy these things right here. That's going to be your data set, your list of possible values, right? Copy that. And then in this example right here, you're going to implement a drop-down box, okay? To sort of like get all the list of states in United States. Go to data, right? First select the cells, right? Go to data, go to data validation. And then choose list, right? Then you click on this worksheet here. And you highlight, select the range, right? That's going to go here, right? There you go. You see that? That's how when you visit a certain website where they ask you to fill out your address, the user input information, and you get this sort of like you get the chance to be choosing what state in the US that you live, then you kind of like go through this long list, okay? If it works for the list of 3 or 4, it should be working for the list of 50 or 100 or 1,000, right? Let's say you're working on something with, like a possible values of 1,000 or 10,000. It's always good to sort of like, see if it works for the, start developing that logic, for 3 or 4 possible values. Okay, and this is how you do it. That's how you see certain website when the user input information. It's sort of like provide you a very friendly, user-friendly interface. That's it. That's it for this week, week number 2. Okay, and then your goal is basically try to implement these things here. Status, there's a possible value for priority, okay, and then risk level. If you want, you say that, hey, I want to see if I be able to sort of like make this column, right, 100% completed, 60% completed, but I want to have a sort of like a progress bar, right? You want to sort of like implement that progress bar. But anyway, that's going to be our prototype. Whatever you want to do, So that's going to be for this week. And next week we start talking about maybe built-in function and the formulas, right? Yeah. So that's going to be a nice feature if you want to implement. Let's say that instead of like a number that you put in, you want to sort of like have a progress bar, right? Say the percentage progress bar. I don't know, maybe looking for a picture. Completion progress bar. Something like this one. Similar like that, right? If project gets 73%, you want to sort of highlight this way, you can implement that. Okay, so that will conclude, our week 2 presentation for the spreadsheet series. I hope that you enjoy doing it. Conditional formatting and how to implement the drop-down list, because this is going to be dynamically generated. Those values you don't know until the user input it in. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to see you next time, week 3.